Sometimes, betrayal doesn't begin with an affair, it begins with loneliness. In this deeply emotional true infidelity confession, a woman opens up about the night she came home from a birthday party and experienced something that changed how she saw love, family, and herself forever. What started as an innocent conversation with her son became an awakening she never expected. Her story isn't about scandal, it's about realization. It's about what happens when a woman forgets her worth and finds herself searching for affection in all the wrong places. Stay with me till the end, because this one will make you question how easily emotional lines can blur when love at home fades away. Broken heart. They'll subscribe for more true emotional confessions and real-life infidelity stories that reveal the side of love no one talks about. I came home from a birthday party. But what my son did shocked me, a true infidelity story. Chapter 1, The Night That Changed the Air in My House. I remember that night so vividly, it still plays in my mind like a quiet movie I never meant to watch. It was past midnight when I finally got home from my best friend's birthday party. My heels clicked against the pavement, the faint echo mixing with the leftover laughter that still lingered in my ears. I wasn't drunk, not exactly, just warm with the kind of confidence a few glasses of wine and too many compliments can give a woman who hasn't felt seen in a long time. The house was quiet when I stepped in. My husband was away on a business trip, as usual. He'd called earlier, more out of routine than care, asking if I'd locked the back door, if I'd fed the dog, if I was managing. He didn't ask if I missed him, maybe because we both knew the answer didn't matter anymore. Our son, Daniel, was supposed to be asleep. He'd just turned 21, that strange age where a boy's voice deepens, but his soul still searches for something undefined. I didn't expect him to be awake, but as I took off my coat, I saw the faint glow of the living room lamp. "Mom," he called softly, his voice cutting through the silence. I turned and saw him sitting there, the TV off, the room dim except for the light spilling across his face. He looked older somehow. The soft edges of his boyhood were gone, replaced with a quiet stillness that made me feel like I was looking at a stranger I should have known. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Why aren't you asleep?" He shrugged. "Couldn't sleep. Just thinking." I smiled faintly, walking over to him. "About what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at me, really looked. His eyes lingered a second too long, like he was seeing me in a way I wasn't used to being seen anymore. And in that brief pause, I felt something shift in the air, something unspoken, unsettling, but undeniably real. "You look nice," he finally said, almost hesitantly. "Different." What was I doing? Why did I feel drawn to something that made no sense? The answer came slowly, painfully clear, because I was lonely. Deeply, dangerously lonely. And sometimes, loneliness blurs lines you thought could never fade. I should have stopped it there, the glances, the long talks, the way our silences started to mean something more. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because for the first time in years, I felt seen. And that feeling is where all the trouble began. The following week moved in slow motion. I tried to pretend everything was normal, that the air in the house hadn't changed, that my heart didn't beat faster when I heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway. I told myself it was just the comfort of having company again, after so many years of silence. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Every little thing reminded me of that night. The way he looked at me when I spoke, how he noticed the small details, like whether I'd eaten, whether I was tired, or if I'd smiled that day. These were the things my husband used to notice before life hardened him, before our love became a set of polite exchanges and distant calls from hotel rooms. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the living room, Daniel came and sat beside me. He was quiet for a while, just helping, matching socks, folding shirts. I remember thinking how rare that was, not the help, but the presence. "Mom," he said finally, "you've been different lately. Happier." "I like seeing that." I smiled softly. Maybe I just needed to remember what it feels like to breathe. He looked at me for a moment, as if trying to understand what that meant. "You've always been the strongest person I know," he said. "Even when Dad's not here, you hold everything together." The words touched me more than he could have known. I hadn't heard anything kind from my husband in years. Not that he was cruel, he was just absent. His love had become a task, not a choice. Daniel's kindness filled that emptiness, and that's what scared me most. It wasn't wrong, but it could easily become something misunderstood, by him, by me, by anyone watching from the outside. Later that evening, I went for a walk to clear my head. The air was cool, the street quiet except for the rustle of trees. I found myself thinking about how easily love can get misplaced when it's starving for attention. A simple smile, a word of care, they can start to mean more than they should when your heart is hungry. When I got back, Daniel was sitting on the couch watching a movie. He turned when I entered, and there was that same warmth in his eyes, the one that made me feel like I mattered. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just needed some air." He smiled gently. "You can always talk to me, you know. About anything." Days passed quietly after that night, but the silence in the house wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't cold, it was heavy, thoughtful, filled with everything we weren't saying out loud. I started to notice the smallest things, how Daniel's presence seemed to fill the empty spaces, how I caught myself listening for his voice, how I avoided looking too long into his eyes because I didn't want to see what mine might reveal in return. It wasn't attraction, not in the way people would assume. It was something deeper, murkier. A misplaced need for connection, for warmth, for reassurance that I was still alive beneath all the years of emotional neglect. It terrified me how easily the heart could confuse gratitude for affection, comfort for closeness. One evening, while cooking dinner, I heard Daniel humming softly from the living room. It was an old tune, one I used to sing when he was a child. For a moment, I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. That melody had always been a bridge between us, mother and son, before life had scattered us into different corners of the same house. "Mom, you okay?" he asked when he saw me wipe my eyes. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just remembering." He came closer, concern written all over his face. "You don't have to carry everything alone. You always do that." And right then, I realized the cruel irony. In trying to protect him from my pain, I had built walls so tall that he'd started to climb them just to reach me. His kindness wasn't dangerous by itself. What made it dangerous was how desperate I was for it. That night, after dinner, I excused myself early. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at my own reflection under the harsh light. The woman staring back wasn't someone I recognized. She looked older, yes, but also lost, tired, conflicted. I whispered to her, "What are you doing?" And for the first time, I couldn't answer. I realized how dangerously close I had drifted towards something I never intended, not because of desire, but because of neglect. Years of being unseen had made me forget the difference between attention and affection. Daniel wasn't trying to fill a husband's place. He was just giving the love I'd stopped giving myself. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I called my husband. He sounded surprised. "Everything okay?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. "But it can be, if we both start trying again." That conversation wasn't easy. We talked about distance, about resentment, about how time and silence had turned us into strangers. For the first time, I heard his voice soften. Maybe he was lonely too. Maybe he'd forgotten how to reach me the same way I'd forgotten how to reach him. When I hung up, I felt something lift, not relief, but a fragile kind of hope. I knew then that the connection between Daniel and me needed to return to what it was always meant to be: family, love, care, nothing more, nothing less. That sentence, it melted me and frightened me all at once. I wanted to tell him how grateful I was, how much it meant to feel seen again, but I also knew I had to protect him from something he couldn't yet understand. So I said the only thing that felt safe. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." That night, I sat by my bedroom window long after he'd gone to bed. I could hear the faint sound of music from his room, calm, slow, familiar. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer I hadn't said in years. Not for forgiveness, but for clarity. Because sometimes, what shocks us most isn't a single moment, but the slow realization that the line between care and confusion can disappear so quietly you don't even hear it crossing. And I was standing right on that line. I whispered to her, "What are you doing?" And for the first time, I couldn't answer. I realized how dangerously close I had drifted towards something I never intended, not because of desire, but because of neglect. Years of being unseen had made me forget the difference between attention and affection. Daniel wasn't trying to fill a husband's place. He was just giving the love I'd stopped giving myself. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I called my husband. He sounded surprised. "Everything okay?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. "But it can be, if we both start trying again." That conversation wasn't easy. We talked about distance, about resentment, about how time and silence had turned us into strangers. For the first time, I heard his voice soften. Maybe he was lonely too. Maybe he'd forgotten how to reach me the same way I'd forgotten how to reach him. When I hung up, I felt something lift, not relief, but a fragile kind of hope. I knew then that the connection between Daniel and me needed to return to what it was always meant to be: family, love, care, nothing more, nothing less. That evening, I sat beside him again, this time without hesitation or confusion. We talked about his plans, his dreams, his future. The lightness in his laughter reminded me of when he was small, when love was simple and safe. And for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Because the truth is, emotional hunger can make you reach for the wrong kind of warmth, but healing begins the moment you admit you've been cold for too long. I wasn't proud of how close I had come to losing myself. But I was proud that I had stopped before crossing a line I could never uncross. That evening, I sat beside him again, this time without hesitation or confusion. We talked about his plans, his dreams, his future. The lightness in his laughter reminded me of when he was small, when love was simple and safe. And for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Because the truth is, emotional hunger can make you reach for the wrong kind of warmth, but healing begins the moment you admit you've been cold for too long. I wasn't proud of how close I had come to losing myself. But I was proud that I had stopped before crossing a line I could never uncross. It's strange how life teaches us the hardest lessons in the quietest ways. No scandal, no confrontation, just a slow realization that love, when starved for too long, can start seeking warmth in the wrong shadows. Weeks have passed since that night I came home from the birthday party. The air in the house feels lighter now, calmer. Daniel is back to being himself, cheerful, focused, teasing me the way sons do when they sense their mothers have been through too much. And I'm learning to breathe again without guilt. What happened, or almost happened, never crossed into anything wrong. But it opened my eyes to something I had buried deep for years: how loneliness can distort the heart's compass. When affection disappears from a marriage, when words become routine and touches fade into memory, a person starts to hunger, not for passion, but for connection. That's what I had been missing all along. That night when Daniel told me I deserved to be happy, I mistook it for something more than it was. It wasn't a man's affection I needed. It was acknowledgement. A reminder that I still existed as a woman, not just a caretaker, not just someone keeping the household running while love quietly died in another room. I started therapy soon after my conversation with my husband. I told the counselor about everything, not the details, but the feelings. The longing, the guilt, the confusion. She said something that stuck with me. "You didn't almost betray your husband, you almost betrayed yourself. You almost believed you weren't worthy of love unless someone else noticed you." That sentence broke me open. Because it was true. I had been chasing a reflection of the love I should have been giving myself. My husband and I are trying now, slowly, awkwardly, but sincerely. We talk more. We sit down to dinner without the TV on. He listens, I listen. Sometimes we still fall silent, but even that silence feels different, it feels shared. As for Daniel, I've learned to love him again the way I should, as my son, my heart, my reminder of what unconditional love really looks like. The warmth between us now is clean, unburdened. We don't need to fill the empty spaces anymore, we've both learned how to live in them honestly. I laughed, brushing it off, but my heart stuttered. Compliments had become rare in this house. My husband's words were functional, never tender. To hear that, even from my son, touched something in me I didn't expect to awaken. "Thank you," I said softly, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. It was a good night. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness that I couldn't explain. The house was bright and calm, yet the air felt different, almost charged, like something invisible had changed overnight. I went about my routine, making coffee, feeding the dog, opening the curtains, but my mind kept replaying that conversation from the night before. It wasn't anything inappropriate, I told myself. Just a late-night talk between a mother and her grown son. But the way he had looked at me, the way his voice softened when he said he missed me, it lingered in the back of my mind like the echo of a song I couldn't turn off. Daniel came downstairs a few minutes later, still sleepy, his hair tousled, wearing a plain t-shirt. He looked young again, the boy who used to run into my arms after school. And yet, every now and then, when his eyes met mine, I could still feel that quiet shift, the strange tension that neither of us knew how to name. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. "You want breakfast?" He nodded. "Sure." As I made pancakes, he stood nearby, leaning against the counter, watching me. There was something gentle about his presence, something comforting. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us wasn't awkward, it was heavy, warm, almost soothing. He took a bite of his food and said, "You look really happy lately. That party must have been good for you." I laughed lightly. I don't know about happy, but it was nice to be around people again. He nodded, still watching me. "I'm glad you had fun. You deserve to." The words hit harder than they should have. There was kindness in his tone, pure, maybe, but laced with an emotion I couldn't name. I sat down beside him, too tired to question it, too lonely to step back from the warmth of being noticed. We talked, about nothing and everything. About school, about his plans, about how quiet the house felt without his father. And as the minutes slipped into hours, I felt a strange connection forming, fragile, dangerous, but honest. When I finally stood up to leave, he said something that made me stop cold. "Mom," he said quietly, eyes lowering for just a second before meeting mine again. "Sometimes I wish we talked like this more often. I miss you." Those words, they broke something inside me. I hadn't realized how much I'd been missed, even in my own home. And that's when it started, the moment that shocked me. Not because it was wrong, but because it reminded me that even in the safety of family, love can take strange shapes when loneliness lives too long. I didn't know that night was the beginning of something I would never be able to forget. That's why I chose to tell this story anonymously. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I know there are people, especially women, who feel what I felt. The kind of emptiness that makes you forget your worth. The kind that whispers, you just need someone to notice you. But the truth is, you don't need someone else to notice you, you need to notice yourself again. So this is my confession. Not of sin, but of rediscovery. I came home from a birthday party that night expecting nothing. I didn't know that the shock I'd feel wouldn't come from my son's actions, but from my own heart waking up to how lost I'd become. And maybe, in its own quiet way, that was the beginning of healing. Disclaimer. This story is a true emotional confession shared anonymously for mature audiences. It is intended for storytelling and awareness purposes only. Names, locations, and minor details have been changed to protect privacy. The content does not promote infidelity or inappropriate behavior, it highlights emotional struggles, human vulnerability, and the importance of self-awareness in relationships. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this story till the end. Red Heart. If this story touched your heart or made you think about how fragile love and connection can be, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Every story shared here is a journey, not just of mistakes, but of lessons, rediscovery, and healing. Bell turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode from our True Infidelity Stories series, where real emotions meet real experiences. Until next time, remember, sometimes, the most shocking truths are the ones that help us find ourselves again.